So, Nancy Kline and fellow Time to Think consultants and coaches, I'm very honored to have Dale Christian with me from Remitly, a company in America that we've done a little bit of work with on the thinking environment. And I'll get Dale to introduce the role he has in Remitly. But really, it's not about his job in the day job. It's what he did in jury service, which I'm going to ask him to explain a bit about that. But I think, Nancy, this is such a profound insight, may have been used by others, but if not, it really needs to be used systemically within the legal system for juries to actually make sure that justice is done and people are drawn out who would otherwise stay quiet, not contribute, and who they may rush decisions way too early. This was a 6 to 7 week testimony and 5 days of deliberation. And Dale himself very kindly stepped forward to do the awful job of jury foreman, but he used the process on about 4 occasions during those 5 days of deliberation. And it proved to be profound in drawing out the introverts, which is something the process does well, and also in just seeing that equality and fairness was done. Dale, would you introduce yourself and just say how you found it so useful in this jury process?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm Dale Christian. I'm the VP of IT and Facilities at Remitly, and you and your team have done a great job of training and coaching me and my teams in using the thinking environment at Remitly. We use it regularly across the company for our corporate meetings. When I was selected for jury duty in December, I didn't realize this would end up being a 2-month-long first-degree murder trial. And as I mentioned earlier, there were 2 aspects of this trial that were particularly challenging for everybody in the jury. The first was the subject matter was horrific and stuff that you shouldn't be exposed to in normal life. A young girl shot in the head. And the other part was it was a complicated trial with very little direct evidence, no murder weapon, no forensic evidence tying the witness or the defendant to the crime, no motive. And no eyewitnesses to the crime. So we were left with a lot of circumstantial evidence, really difficult subject matter, and an extended period of time where we were not allowed to discuss anything about the trial, even with other members of the jury. So when we came into deliberations, and I was selected as the foreman of the jury, I proposed that we use the thinking environment to get us going in deliberations, because everybody had 6 weeks of stuff packed in their brains of lots of types of things, emotional things, legal things, intellectual things, sort of puzzle solving things. And I wanted to get us started in a way that didn't, make people feel like they were being suppressed. I started with a thinking round of about 20 minutes per person, 12 members of the jury. So it was more than half the day. Between me instructing them on, my understanding of how the process works, and then actually executing the thinking round. I started the first thinking round that was centered around a really broad question. What are you thinking about this case now, and how do you think we should approach deliberations? And as Jonathan said, it did a couple of things really, really well. One was it unburdened everybody, allowed people to unburden themselves emotionally, which was a huge thing. It was a very, very therapeutic and cathartic, because nobody had talked about any of the stuff that was in their head for weeks and weeks. And it let them do that without a structure that felt unnatural to them. 2 is it brought 12 really different and valuable points of view to the problem-solving process, which is really what we were in. There was no argument throughout the course of our deliberations. There was problem solving, collaborative problem solving, so one of the other things it did really effectively right out of the gate was it allowed people who really had not spoken at all through the course of the trial, even we're just sitting around, waiting for things to happen. It brought them out and let them have their voice heard. There were 2 people who never spoke for 6 weeks. They had extremely valuable insights. What else? As we went through the deliberations, as Jonathan mentioned, I used the process thinking rounds. I think about 4 times over the course of 5 days of deliberations. Each time I used it to sort of unstick us from a tough spot in the problem-solving process, or to answer a really specific legal question that was kind of holding us up. And at the end of the process, everybody was extremely grateful for what the thinking process brought, and how it allowed us to get everybody's voice heard, structure the deliberations. Ultimately, we went from initially being biased towards acquittal because the case was so weak to convicting, which ultimately was the correct verdict. And it was largely due to the way that we were able to sort of thoughtfully and collaboratively move through a problem-solving process rather than sort of arguing randomly about stuff. And the structure of the thinking round was really integral to that success.
And what more do you think or feel or want to say, particularly about one of the quietest members and what contribution they made to your thinking process?
Yeah, so there was one guy who didn't say anything through 6 weeks of sitting together in the jury room. And when we got to him in the thinking round, it turns out his profession is data analysis. And he was able to, when I identified that, I sort of, focused on him for a very particular bit of problem solving. He was able to, by the end of the first day, put together an Excel model of all of this data that we had been, dumped on us about cell phone locations, GPS coordinates of cell phone towers, surveillance videos from gas stations, all this sort of random stuff, and put together a concrete timeline of activities over the course of the weekend this crime occurred, which allowed us to anchor every other bit of analysis of testimony and events. And that was the pivotal point in our actual, deliberative process that allowed us to get to a verdict that was correct. Without that, there's no way we would have done it. And I would have no way of knowing that he was capable of doing that.
And thank you, Dale. And also, I think the profound nature of making use of the thinking environment was, had you not used it, and you'd had the usual arguments in a jury and not drawn out the quieter one, what might have happened in this case?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 people who were very loud, very extroverted and very opinionated, and their voices would have overpowered everyone else. And in retrospect, there's absolutely no way we could have come to the conclusion we did without the super detailed kind of analytical work that was done by a couple of people in the jury. And I'm not sure that would have been done if we hadn't had the chance to hear what they were thinking and were capable of.
And what might have happened to the accused?
We would probably have a psycho killer loose right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also, that commitment that you've given to society of 2 months of your life, which clearly had a huge impact on you psychologically. I mean, not being able to sleep, you and the others, for 6 weeks, every night mulling over what was going on, not able to take notes away with you or anything like that. I can't think how hard it was for you. But thank you for sharing your story, because with your permission, and I do understand you granting your permission, I'd like to send this to Nancy and to the team so they can understand how you've taken some basic training that we gave you, or just work with you and your teams, and adapted it to a completely different environment that has great opportunity for Nancy's work to make a difference in the lives of people around the world, so that justice is done and the right result comes out rather than the loudest voices. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. That's exactly the reason that I contacted you to share this story with you. It was profoundly impactful. This entire experience it's profoundly impactful to me. And I, this, I don't know, this methodology, this way of thinking came along at exactly the right time to have a really important impact for me, for 11 other people on the jury, and for society in total. Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. And I think I probably sold another 11 copies of the book by the end of the trial.
And you, I mentioned a number of books to you and the others to read. I think, was it The Promise That Changes Everything? I Won't Interrupt You, or was it another one?
I think It's Time to Think was the one that I recommended to them, but I've been through them all myself. But yeah, I super happy to share this. And if Nancy or anybody else wants to get into any more depth, I'm happy to follow up with a little more color commentary about the experience.
Thank you, Dale. You're a good man, and thank you for what you've done for society as well.
Yeah, sure.